Do you hear its call? It's coming! The old gods are returning to Hearthstone very soon with the Madness at the Darkmoon Faire expansion.
Huh, this should be interesting.
Last week, Hearthstone announced that the Madness at the Darkmoon Faire expansion is coming on November 17th, a bit earlier than normal. So as we've done with the last few expansions, we're going to review the cards that have been announced. However, we usually run out of time to get through all the cards before the expansion hits, so the main reviews will be a bit shorter this time. That being said, we're still using our 3 questions format rather than the normal 5-star ratings for cards. If this is your first time, the questions we ask are: would the card fit into one of the current meta decks, Tier 1 through Tier 3 decks per HSReplay's tier list? So, is it meta now? We use this to gauge the card's power level a bit. Second, will the card fit into a meta deck once the expansion comes out? Meaning, from what we know so far, even if it doesn't fit into a current meta deck, is it powerful enough to create or support a new meta archetype? So is it meta later? And third, and most importantly, does it inspire or enable crazy, experimental, or meme decks? So is it meme deck worthy? Each card will get a yes or no to these questions. There is a link to quick reviews with puns in the description below for those of you without much time. For everyone else, let's get into the main reviews. So let's start by looking at a card with the new keyword, Corrupt. Corrupt cards upgrade once you've played a card with a higher mana cost while it's in your hand. For example, Fleethoof Pearltusk is a neutral beast 5 mana 4/4 with Rush and Corrupt gain +4/+4. So, as a 5 mana card, you have to play something that costs 6 or more while it's in your hand, and then it'll turn into the corrupted version, which is a 5 mana 8/8 corrupted Rush. So would this card be meta now? I don't think so. It's got a similar stat line when it's upgraded to Faceless Corruptor, but you're not going to be able to play it until usually turn 7 or later in order to have played a 6 cost or higher card. So it's the feels bad version of Faceless Corruptor until at least turn 7. And I just don't think that's strong enough to put in any current meta decks. And in the future, even with the new version of Yogg-Saron we'll cover later, from what we've seen thus far, probably not. We'll need a lot more corrupt synergy in order for it to actually see play in the new meta. But from what we know now, I can't say it's meta later either. However, we will definitely build a couple decks focusing on making use of Corrupt, even if they don't become meta, so some classes will still be able to meme with this no matter what. Shamans are one of the first classes to see what a class-specific Corrupt card for them is. Dunk Tank is a 4 mana spell to deal 4 damage, and when it's corrupted, it also deals 2 damage to all enemy minions. So in the current meta, Totem Shamans wouldn't want to touch this, but Control Shaman might be able to use it. It's more expensive than Lightning Breath for the base effect, but it can go a little bit wider. Now, Lightning Breath doesn't currently make the cut, perhaps because of the Dragon synergy, but the higher cost cards would be a little bit easier to pull off for Control Shamans. However, with so many AoE damage options available to Shamans that don't have a requirement like this, I don't know that it would make it at the moment. Now once the set comes out, maybe Highlander Shaman will reach the top 3 tiers, and perhaps this makes the cut? It might be good enough as a one of, especially if there's more corrupt synergy. Very questionable, yes? But one thing that is really cool about this card is that the 4 damage can go face, so it would be like a Druid swipe for spell damage Shaman. Can we use this in a Muckmorpher deck with Malygos to deal a ton of damage? It's definitely worth experimenting with. The last corrupt card from the initial reveal was for the class that you don't expect to get corrupted, Paladins. Day at the Fair is a 3 mana spell to summon 3 Silverhand recruits, and if you've corrupted it, so you've played something 4 cost or higher, it'll actually summon 5 Silverhand recruits. This is a nice cheap way to get a fairly wide board for 3 mana, and even if you just get 3 Silverhand recruits, that's not bad for the cost. So Paladin has several decks in the top 2 tiers of the meta at the moment, but none of them would want this. Compared with everything else they're doing, this is too weak before it's corrupted, and it's too slow after it's corrupted. Perhaps the new meta will see a resurgence of aggro paladin with righteous cause and brazen zealot. It's probably a little bit too weak without corrupt or silver hand recruit synergy, so it probably won't make it into the new meta either. However, we will build a token synergy deck with righteous cause, air raid, sword of justice, and this. Perhaps even as a way to transition into a dual paladin? There's certainly potential. Now, for what will almost certainly be the most ferocious minion from the set. Mortals tremble at its name. The most valiant knights with tier 21 or higher armor will still lose their heads to this mythic creature. Even the old gods themselves will die to one bite from the Darkmoon Rabbit. This ferocious furball is a 10 mana 1/1 beast with rush and poisonous that also damages the minions next to whomever it attacks. It is a guaranteed removal on 3 minions that don't have Divine Shield, but at 10 mana that's just way too expensive to use in a current meta deck. And with Commencement or Scarlet Webweaver, we may be able to help cheat this out a little bit faster or get more use from it, but no deck running this would be able to survive in the new meta either. However, we're definitely going to throw a deck together with Scarlet Webweavers, Ramkahan Wild Tamers, hunting parties, in order to make a terrifying swarm of deadly rabbits. And that's just the first one we're going to make. There will be plenty of meme decks centered around this. Now, if it sounded like it'll be a puzzle to make good use of Darkmoon Rabbit, this next card is practically a puzzle that you'll have to assemble over the course of the game in order to use it. The first new old god we're looking at is Cthulhu, the Shattered. He's a 10 mana 6/6 with an effect that at the start of the game he'll break into pieces, and his battle cry is to deal 30 damage randomly split among all enemies. So these are the 4 pieces that Cthulhu breaks into at the start of the game. The body of Cthulhu, the eye of Cthulhu, the heart of Cthulhu, and the maw of Cthulhu. Once you've managed to play each of these cards, they'll combine into Cthulhu the Shatter, which will then get shuffled back into your deck, and once you finally draw it and play it, you'll get to deal 30 damage randomly split among all enemies. It's a bit of a crazy puzzle to put together, but it's kind of fun too. So the body of Cthulhu is just a 5 mana spell to summon a 6/6 with taunt. Not bad. And the Eye of Cthulhu is kind of like Avenging Wrath for 1 mana less to deal 1 damage less randomly split among all enemies. And then we've got the Heart of Cthulhu dealing 3 damage to all minions. It's a little expensive for 5 mana. And finally we've got Assassinate, a card that pretty much never sees play. So for all the work you do to gather these pieces of Cthulhu, play them out, and then get Cthulhu back and play it out, you're definitely not using this in an aggressive deck. You'd be using it in some control deck. In the current meta, we do have Big Warrior and Big Druid, but they both recruit minions from their deck that would feel terrible to draw Cthulhu the Shattered onto the board without getting its battle cry, so they wouldn't include it. And both Control Shaman and Control Priest are the bottom of tier 3, and this really wouldn't help improve them. Cthulhu would be an interesting alternative to Archivist Elysiana at the end, but the pieces are probably too slow and too expensive to play as it is now, so I don't think this would make the cut for current meta decks. So Quest Shaman is currently a tier 4 deck, and Quest Shaman would be able to get guaranteed value out of Cthulhu by doubling its battle cry, dealing 60 damage to everything on the opponent's side, but it's built pretty aggressively at the moment. Perhaps a Quest Control Shaman or Control Warrior will be able to use this effectively enough to earn a spot in the new meta? We're gonna give it a hopeful meta later. And you know people want to build decks with this in every class, so this is certainly going to be inspiring fun experiments, meaning it is definitely meme deck worthy. So if you thought the requirement to get value from Cthulhu was unusual, check out what you have to do for the new N'Zoth. N'Zoth is a 10 mana 5/7 with a battle cry to resurrect a friendly minion of each minion type, meaning pirate, elemental, dragon, yada whatnot. Looking through the current meta deck lists, I was surprised to see how many use minions of 2 or even 3 different types. However, a lot of the time, 1 or 2 of the unusual minions are just 1 or 2 drops that wouldn't be too exciting to get, as their value is bundled into their battle cry. The current meta deck with the most potential from N'Zoth is actually Highlander Mage, as Imprisoned Observer and Solarian Prime are demons. Zephrys and Siamat are elementals, Escaped Mana Saber is a beast, and there are a number of great dragons that can come back. For pure value, Big Druid would be a contender as a free Scrapyard Colossus and Winged Guardian alongside any dragon is very exciting. Getting N'Zoth off of strength and numbers would be disappointing, but he'd probably still be worth including. And when it's an option to build decks with him in mind, it wouldn't be too difficult for a deck or 2 to capitalize on a late game reload with him, even if they're only getting 2 or 3 minions from him. And for meme decks, trying to summon a board of 6 different minion types alongside N'Zoth? There is a worthy challenge. Sign me up. Now, the next old god has received countless requests for blessed RNG from players, and in his new form, you truly do surrender yourself to a roulette wheel of fate. Yogg-Saron, Master of Fate, is a 10 mana 7/5 with a battle cry that if you've cast 10 spells this game, you spin the wheel of Yogg-Saron. With the wheel of Yogg-Saron, there are 6 possible outcomes, and one of those is a 5% chance to end the game right there by casting Rod of Roasting, which does pyroblasts randomly until one player dies. The other 5 possibilities have a 19% chance of getting hit, with the first of those being Hand of Fate, which fills your hand with random spells that cost 0 this turn, so it's a much better evocation. The next one is Curse of Flesh, which fills the board with random minions and then gives yours Rush, so you're hoping your minions are better than theirs and you can trade off everything that they got. And the third main possibility is Mind Flayer Goggles, which takes control of 3 random enemy minions, hopefully not lackeys. So it's like 3 mind controls all cast at once. And the fourth main option is Mystery Box. It's basically old version of Yogg-Saron that he'll just cast spells randomly based on the number of spells you've cast to that point in the game. And the last version is Devouring Hunger, which destroys all other minions and gains their attack and health, meaning you could actually have a minion bigger than the Ancient One on the board with Yogg-Saron. So which class would willingly surrender themselves to RNG like this? Well, mages already run Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. While probably worth including, he's a bit heavy for a small spell mage, which has fallen to tier 4, so it's just outside of our meta criteria. But Highlander Mage could run him. However, Highlander Mage might have difficulty playing 10 spells before dropping him, as a number of the limited spells in the deck are quite expensive. Guardian and Big Druid could both activate him easily enough, but I'm not sure that they would want to run him. So borderline not meta now? But with a card like this, it wouldn't be surprising if Small Spell Mage climbs back into the top 3 tiers, and there may be another spell-heavy meta deck or 2 that uses this as an emergency comeback card. And of course, there is no escape from the master of RNG. Random memes must be had. Actually, let's try out a Blur Demon Hunter and see if we can pyroblast our opponent to death. Now for the last of the old gods returning to Hearthstone, Yashar's the Defiler. He's a 10 mana 10/10 with a battle cry to add a copy of each corrupted card you've played this game to your hand, and they cost 0 this turn. If we get some powerful corrupted cards, Yashar's the Defiler will be a powerhouse. But there are no corrupt cards in the game at the moment, so Yashar's right now is just a 10 mana 10/10 that wouldn't join any decks. So sorry, old god. And whether or not he finds a home in the new meta will depend entirely upon the strength of the new corrupt cards that are announced for the set. The current cards aren't quite exciting enough to say that he'll earn a slot, but surely Blizzard wouldn't release an entire set with a useless keyword overkill, right? Yasharj gets a hopeful meta later status. And we can already see that some of the corrupt cards feel a bit weak to play, so it'll be a challenge for meme deck players like myself to try and make them work well with Y'Sharj, even with the cards that don't make the cut in meta decks. So yeah, this is meme deck worthy. Now that we're done with the old gods of chaos, let's turn to the cards for the class that felt like gods of high rolling until recent nerfs, Druid. First up is the new Lunar Eclipse. It's a 2-mana spell to deal 3 damage to a minion. Your next spell this turn costs 2 less. Since it's a bit more flexible in the early game than Bogbeam, and it's easy to pair with other spells in the late game in a similar manner to how Bogbeam is used now, I think some versions of Big Druid and Guardian Druid would consider swapping or including it. And we'll almost certainly see a new meta deck or two find ways to abuse this effect, so yeah, it'll be meta later too. Alongside Lightning Bloom, Innervate, Forest Warden Omu, and perhaps most importantly, Nature Studies, there's probably a broken way to use this. This should help enable a new meme deck or two. In World of Warcraft, druids in Moonkin form would switch between Lunar Eclipse and Solar Eclipse bonuses, so it's not surprising that alongside Lunar Eclipse we also get Solar Eclipse. Solar Eclipse is a 2-mana spell that causes your next spell this turn to cast twice. And for those of us hoping to abuse the Solar Eclipse into Solar Eclipse to try and cast something 4 times, usually when a card says twice, we can't actually double up on it, so it's probably only going to cast the next spell twice. While Big Druid and Guardian Druid may find it a bit awkward to use Solar Eclipse effectively, Gibberling Druid might actually consider using it. While it would be a questionable inclusion as a non-hyper-aggressive card, the opportunity to double Savage Roar for 5 mana, or double Blessing of the Ancients and get an extra twin spell copy back in hand might just be enough to earn it a slot. Several of the other spells would feel fine to double for just 2 mana more. It's questionable, but I think this would be a meta now card. And while I initially thought that this was just an in-game combo enabler card, the ability to double token generation or buff spells makes me think there's a good chance this will find a home in the new meta as well. With Forest Warden Omu's help, it'll be easy to cast 2 Survival of the Fittest on a single turn using this, and there's probably even more broken stuff just waiting for us to discover how to use it. So yeah, this is meme deck worthy. A moment ago, I mentioned druids in Moonkin form. Those of you who never played Warcraft may not know what that looks like. Well, this next card ties everything together quite nicely. Kiri, Chosen of Elune, is a 4-mana 2/2 with a battlecry to add a Solar Eclipse and a Lunar Eclipse to your hand. Now, while Lunar Eclipse and Solar Eclipse both have potential homes in the current meta, the decks they support wouldn't necessarily run the other Eclipse, and although there are 2 spells and a body bundled into 1 card, paying 4 mana for a 2/2 just to get an extra copy doesn't seem like something that any of the current meta decks would be willing to do. And while there's a lot bundled into this card, it would require a powerful combo deck that really wants an extra copy of one or both of these Eclipses, enough to pay at least 2 mana extra to get them. Even with Druid's absurd ramp ability, it's hard to see a meta deck choosing to include this, so I don't think it'll be meta later. However, if we really want to double our spells 3 times across the course of a game, Kiri will allow us to do it. I don't see a combo that merits it right now, but the potential's there, so we're going to go ahead and give this meme deck worthy status. While Kiri may be the Chosen of Elune, priests using this next card will not get to choose their own fortune. Fortune Teller is a 5-mana 3/3 mech with Taunt and a battle cry to gain +1/+1 for each spell in your hand. One thing I will say right away is that this card makes me very glad that Divine Spirit rotated to the Hall of Fame. Now, the base stats of this are terrible for Res Priest, and while Control Priest does generate a large number of spells in hand with Wandmaker and Cobalt Spellkin, it would be surprising if they would choose to include this Taunt minion. So I don't think this would be meta now. Perhaps a very spell-heavy deck will evolve to take advantage of this, and it will command the same level of presence as a Blessing of Authority buffed minion in Paladin? I have a hard time seeing that come to pass though. But if Priest gets some kind of token generation spell to hide minions behind this, there's a chance it could see play. Probably not though. And while wild decks could use Magnetic to transform this minion into a terror, in Standard, there's not much exciting to do with this. While we could use Psyche Split on this in a buff Priest deck, it won't be like Divine Spirit Inner Fire decks of old, and other than Taunt, we'd be better off using Flesh Giant in that case. Let me know in the comments below if you think of a broken way to use this, but for now, we're gonna say it's not meme deck worthy. While Fortune Teller can't tell its way into a deck of any type, perhaps it could help you figure out the answer to this next card? Guess the Weight is a 2-mana druid spell to draw a card, and then guess if your next card costs more or less to draw it. Now, my assumption may be wrong, but if the next card costs the same, I'm guessing neither choice allows you to draw a second card. For most classes, this would be amazing, but even if they could reliably guess the cost of the next card to get 2 cards each time, none of the current Druid meta decks would sacrifice a slot to this. Gibberling Druid would be the best candidate, but there's a really high chance of drawing a 1-mana card, and the card after it being a 1-mana card as well, meaning you wouldn't receive the second card if I understand this correctly. Voracious Reader will just have to keep putting in work. And again, 2-mana draw 2 cards is amazing, but I don't think that Druid cares about that at the moment. Perhaps when the next set comes out and current card draw cards rotate, this will become relevant enough to include, but I don't think it'll make it now. How can we bet against a 2-mana draw 2 card? It feels so wrong, but I'm gonna do it. And while card draw is always appreciated to help cycle through the deck for things like Chef Nomi, Druid already has an absurd amount of card draw. This is nice and cheap, but I don't think it enables or inspires any new meme or experimental decks. That bear is just too heavy to include in meme decks either. And the last card for this review is a card most of you have already begun experimenting with. Silas Darkmoon is a 7-mana 4/4 neutral minion with a battle cry to choose a direction to rotate all minions. Now, while he's seeing a fair bit of experimentation on the ladder at the moment, and we've played our fair share of games with him, none of the meta decks are slotting him in with any seriousness. And even though Soulbound Ashtongue combos are great, and Quest Shaman may have some impressive options with Silas, from what we've seen thus far, it's extremely unlikely he'll join the future meta either. Unless there's a card announced that has a huge drawback for having on your side of the board, Silas will remain an experimental and meme deck card. However, we have already done some really fun experiments in Warlock and Warrior with Silas, and there are game highlight videos coming out soon. We might even make a video of the Octosari Rogue deck? We'll see. But Silas has already proven himself worthy of memes and experimentation, and if there's anything new and interesting to pair with him in the madness of the Darkmoon Faire, we'll certainly be exploring that as well. And now for the quick reviews. Fleethoof Pearltusk has an inferiority complex to Faceless Corruptor in the current meta, needs serious corrupt support to have a chance of goring its way into the new meta, but corruption meme decks will give this Elic a chance to stomp around. No current meta decks want to waste precious tickets on Dunk Tank at the moment, but Highlander Shaman and some other meta decks might be willing to test the waters, and Malagos and Muckmorpher eagerly await the chance to aim at meme decks. Current Paladin decks are too busy for a day at the fair, and Aggro Paladin is looking for a chance to corrupt these recruits, but without some corruption or recruit synergy, it won't pounce into the new meta. However, Token and maybe even Dual Paladin look forward to spending a fun day at the fair. Far too many knights have fallen victim to this epic beast for any current or future meta decks to even attempt to include Darkmoon Rabbit, but meme deck players will be willing to risk their necks in an effort to tame this ferocious furball. Cthulhu the Shattered is too scattered for current meta decks to assemble, but Shamans and Warriors may work to reincarnate him in the new meta, And solving puzzles like this in unusual ways is one of the best inspirations for meme decks. With 4 minion types in current forms of Highlander Mage, and 3 massive minion types in Big Druid, Zoth, God of the Deep, might just creep his way into current meta decks, can probably latch onto a future meta deck, and he knows you want 6 minions to join him in your meme decks. With Small Spell Mage just barely below tier 3, Yogg-Saron just barely fails to twist his way into current meta decks. But a meta deck or two will surely rise to serve the master of RNG, and there's no escape from memeing with a 5% chance of blurred pyroblasts. Yashar's the Defiler would be too lonely without corrupted friends in the current meta, but surely as the main keyword for the expansion, Corrupt will get enough support to make him work in the new meta, right? Overkill. And there will certainly be off-meta experiments to run with Corrupt cards and this Defiler. Lunar Eclipse might just eclipse Bogbeam as the must-have cheap minion damage spell for druids in current and future meta decks, and students of nature studies are looking for broken applications in meme decks. The army of Gibberlings appreciates Solar Eclipse's ability to double buffs and roars in current and future meta decks, and Forest Warden Omu approves of super survival of the fittest and other meme decks. While each eclipse may be good in certain decks, Kiri, Chosen of Elune, would not be chosen by meta decks in the current or future metas. However, extreme meme players that want to double 3 spells across a game appreciate this moonkin. Fortune Teller must not be very good at telling fortunes because no current or future meta decks look eager to use it. And even meme decks have better bases to work with since Magnetic is no longer in standard. Gibberling Druids guess that the 1 mana card after their 1 mana card will cost more and get nothing from Guess the Weight. Oddly, Druid may be the only class which will pass on drawing 2 cards for 2 mana, but meta decks won't like it, and even Chef Nomi has better things to do than guess the weight of this card. Silas Darkmoon is and will continue to inspire memes and experimentation, but he hasn't swindled his way into any current meta decks, and it's doubtful he'll lead the Darkmoon Faire's meta either. That's a wrap. We'll be reviewing more cards from the madness of the Darkmoon Faire after they come out, so the old gods would appreciate if you like, subscribe, and share their madness to the far reaches of the internet. That was weird. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. And remember, you're awesome. Thank you for watching, and have an awesome day.